Okay. Hi guys. What an interesting game, right? I don't want to give the impression that that I thought this was a bad game. I think it does a lot of really, really cool things. It does a lot of things really well. And I appreciate that it attempts to play with the form in some really interesting ways. But I think that ultimately some of that experimentation doesn't go really well. It doesn't sort of like fall in their favor. And I think that some of the premise, some of the narrative aspects of the game end up feeling kind of bolted on. I think there's a real disconnect between the types of stories that you can tell in passive media, in movies, in books, in podcasts, and the kinds of stories that you can tell in interactive media. And I think we're still learning a lot about what those differences are and what causes them and how to walk around the edges of them. And this kind of like not horror, not thriller, but kind of just spooky. It's kind of like spooky game. I think is an area that that is really tricky to do, and I'm trying to think of other examples of games that really do this, that are this has an atmosphere that's kind of like the atmosphere in like BioShock, right? But it's not BioShock. It's not a shooter. There's not really the threat of enemies jumping around corners and like shooting you to death. It's not Amnesia. It's not Slender. It's a very it's certainly not Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a very different kind of a game, and it has an analog in other types of media. I mean, this I think that, and maybe this is just where my head is, because Dimension 404 is coming out soon, and so I've been thinking about that a lot. Dimension 404, for those of you who do not know, is a new TV series that's going to be a Hulu exclusive starting next month. That's written by some friends of mine and is super neat. Like, it looks really cool. I haven't seen any of it. Like, I don't have any insider information, but it looks really cool. And it's very in the style of like what was it? Oh, God, I'm not gonna remember. Like, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Or there were a couple of these shows that I remember when I was a kid. That was I think Are You Afraid of the Dark is the one with the campfire. But then there was another one that was like I don't remember. You guys might remember. But like, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. It's actually an anthology show, which I didn't sort of realize because I'd never heard that term when I was a kid. That's like like Goosebumps. Was there a Goosebumps TV show? It's like the Goosebumps books, if there wasn't a Goosebumps TV show. It's like, you know, small, independent, scary stories, but like PG-13 scary stories. Nothing that's actually that scary, but they usually have some kind of a twist to them. They're kind of like in the vein of the Twilight Zone, right? Or the Outer Limits, but for middle schoolers. And like a little bit more of a horror kind of event, but like really super light horror. Very campy generally, but interesting. Anyway, so I'm thinking about this kind of thing, and that I feel like is the genre in which this game fits, what it's trying to pull off. And I think we know a lot about how to do thriller kinds of stuff, like really action-packed. And we know at least a bit about how to do horror in interactive settings, but this kind of like spooky, creepy, I don't even know what to call it, but I feel like it's not just like a watered down horror. It's actually like a different feel. It's a categorically different kind of a genre. And I don't know that we know how to do that interactively yet. I'd be really interested if you guys have examples of games that you think tackle the same kind of thematic space or the same kind of mood. You know, like spooky, creepy, but not outright horror, like on the edge of jump scares, but no action, no death, no violence. Be interesting to sort of compare and contrast this with that kind of thing. Anyway, so, questions. There are a couple that are related. So I'm going to jump to do you think this game would have been better as a purely puzzle game without any of the narrative or mystery? I've been thinking about this. Like for the last 2 weeks I've been thinking about this because like right after I did the first half of this game, I went to Toronto to visit some of my family that lives up there, and spent the flight like really thinking about like what was it that was bothering me about the guest. And I wrote some tweets about sort of the relationship between like character mystery, mysterious characters, mysterious protagonists, and interactive media, and how the two don't really work that well together. And then eventually got to a point of like maybe it's dramatic irony that doesn't really work in interactive media, because I think that that's fundamentally true. Dramatic irony, for those of you who did not study as much theater as I did in high school, you will remember, is the sort of literary technique of the audience knowing something that the characters don't know, and the tension that's created by the audience wanting the characters to do something specific based on the knowledge that they have, and the characters doing something different because they don't have the same knowledge. So the end of Romeo and Juliet, Juliet is pretending to be dead. Romeo sees her, doesn't realize that she's pretending, kills himself. And there's a dramatic irony there, right? Because the audience knows that she's pretending, wants him to just like hold on, wait up, don't be rash, like give it a minute, she's gonna wake up, but he doesn't know, and so he does it, and there's this sort of like tragic ending that's just, it's highlighted by the fact that as a member of the audience, you see it coming and there's nothing you can do to prevent it. You can't have that in interactive media, because the whole point of the game is that as a character, I should be able to take action. And so if you give me a situation where as a member of the audience, I know something that the character doesn't know, then either you're going to actively prevent me from taking the action that I want to take, which never feels good, right? That creates a chasm between the player and the character that is, it's, let's explore that later. Actually, there's probably like a thesis in there somewhere, but like that just does not work out well. Or you give me those options and then I change, like I don't do what the character would have done. I do what I want the character to do. And then, you know, the actual tragedy never comes to pass, or whatever it is that you're creating. So that in my mind is related to this game, in the sense that, like, as I was ranting about when I finished it, like, this idea that there's a twist ending that revolves around the character always having known something that I didn't know, which is sort of like an inverted dramatic irony, or and especially when that contextual knowledge is like played up to a degree. This game is all about you don't know what's going on, and it's not that like this character is a blank slate that you're just like completely projecting onto. It's not an arbitrary random person who's trapped in a room who doesn't know what's happening, that is, you know, that is your analog, that is your avatar. It's a specific person who has a relationship to this room, who has a history, who has a backstory that you don't know, or you don't know entirely. And you know enough of it to know that you don't know the important parts. And that I found like really problematic. Problematic in the sense that it takes me out of the game. It takes me out of the experience. It removes me from the story in a way that is almost always detrimental to the story that you're telling. Okay, so the actual question. Do you think the game would have been better as a purely puzzle game without any of the narrative or mystery? I think the narrative and the mystery could have been presented better. Okay, I think the game would have been better as a puzzle game with a narrative and a mystery, but a much simpler one that could be and was presented up front. And maybe that's not a mystery. I mean, let's look at escape rooms. Let's look at like physical, actual escape rooms and that phenomenon. Which, you know, they vary in how much they do in terms of their narrative, but they almost always have a narrative. They have a premise. And the premise does a really, really good job of setting up what is at stake and what the objective is. Like those are the two things that the premise always does. What are the escape rooms that I've done? I've done one where you're in a room that terrorists are trying to break into. And you have an hour before the security fails and they make their way in. And so you have to escape before that happens. I've been in one where you are a bank robber and you have tripped the alarm and for some reason the police will not arrive for an hour. And so you have... But the point is you have like an amount of time before the police arrive, and you have to break into the vault and steal the diamonds and get out before that happens. I've done one that is a bunker that has like nuclear missiles set to launch on a timer, and you have to like find the code to disable the launch before they go off. You know, it's this kind of thing. Like and you see the same premises or variations on the same premises over and over again, which is fine. Like there's not really a problem with that. Some of these are like really clever. Or more clever, are like are definitely more evolved, but all of them, like the key things that you always know are what's at stake and what's your objective. You're trying to get out of the room in a limited amount of time, or something bad is going to happen. And I think one of the real problems with this game as an escape room, because it really is that we don't know either of those things. We don't know, like the game doesn't tell us. The game doesn't set up for us what our objective is and what's at stake. It just puts us in a room. And we kind of have to rely on outside knowledge to assume what the objective is, but what's at stake is never revealed until the end. And then, you know, by then that's too late. Like we've already tried to go through this whole game. I just feel like that playing the game without a sense of what's at stake. I mean, maybe that's my underlying point. Maybe like now is when I'm really hitting it, is that because these are the same things that I talk to my beginning design students about crafting an instruction booklet for their tabletop games. When you make a board game and you write instructions for it, the first two things that you need to put in there are what is the point of this? What are you trying to do as a player? What's the objective of the game? And why are you trying to do that? Like you're an explorer and you're trying to you know, make the most money on your expeditions. Like that tells me right up front, even if some of it is implicit, what is my objective and what is at stake. And I think that's like a really core part of interacting with media, is having that understanding. I think a game that deliberately obscures those things and then sort of, you know, makes a point of how they have been obscured, creates a real dissonance with the player. You guys have some like really good examples, it seems like, of escape room themes, I think is what I'm seeing. Oh no, you just have like stories about terrible things happening to you on jobs. Wow. Okay. All right. Yes. You know, important note for viewers at home: if you actually try to rob a bank, the police get there faster. than they do in the escape rooms. So that's, I think, like, that gets to me. To me, that gets to a lot of the stuff that I really wanted to say about this game. This game has great atmosphere. It had good puzzles. It was, like, successfully, it was creepy, but not, like, scary. Like, it did a lot of things. It started off in this, like, really enclosed space and then successfully expanded the space. One of the coolest things that it did was it, like, in the middle had this interlude where it took us out of the space and, like, did some things, some, like, physics bending stuff, some non-Euclidean stuff that you couldn't conceivably do in a physical escape room, and that's cool. That's really neat. But I think it sort of screws its premise doesn't fundamentally work. And so would it have been better if it had been just puzzles with no narrative and no mystery? I'm going to say it would have been better if it had just had a simpler narrative, if it had been more straightforward with its narrative. And you know what? I bet you anything it would have been better if it had presented us with a palatable narrative and then a twist at the end. I think that I would have appreciated that much, much more than something that that was sort of vacuous at the beginning and filled in all of the detail at the end. That's the part that I think really didn't work. How do you feel about this game versus what you saw and experienced in The Room? So I didn't see a lot of The Room, but the sense that I got from The Room is that it is that game. It is The Guest without any of the narrative or the mystery. It's just some puzzles. It's like you're in a room with some puzzles. And my sense of it is that similarly, you walk in and you don't really have a sense of what your objective is or what's at stake. But unlike this game, there very clearly is not like an objective. There's not anything at stake. And that's a little bit wrong. Like, I saw kind of the end of The Room or something. There was like some kind of a dimensional portal and you're helping your grandfather. I don't know. Like, it was stuff. But it all seemed like nonsense. Maybe that's because I came in halfway. But all of it seemed like much fluffier. None of this was the point. The point was, like, you walk into a room that's got a bunch of puzzles in it. What are you going to do? Like, you want to solve some of these puzzles? You want to see, like, how smart you are? Like, try it out. And that's very cool. Like I get that. That works. It's not as compelling to me as a game that has a narrative that sort of pulls it together and hangs together. And that narrative doesn't have to be strong. It just needs to give me a sense of purpose, right? Like, steal the diamonds before the police get here in an hour. Like, that's a narrative that doesn't make a fucking lick of sense, right? Like, that's nonsense. But it's compelling. Like, it gives me a sense of purpose. It sets me out right at the beginning, and I can overcome some of those suspension of disbelief hurdles and then play that game. So that's sort of my take. I think that The Room is very similar to The Guest. It does a couple of things differently, much more conservatively, much more traditionally, and in some ways that works out for it, right? Like it stays true. It stays on the sort of well-hewn path. Can you hew a path? I'm not sure if that's... It stays in territory that's known. And The Guest kind of wanders off into some like unsafe territory, and it pays for that sometimes. But I respect that it is taking those risks, and some of those risks, frankly, pay off. Like the way that its space expands, it does that marvelously well. There are a couple of backtracky sorts of puzzles, but the backtracky puzzles are pretty obvious. All of the like really nitty gritty puzzles were very like location aware. Like it does that really super smart. The room, as I understood it, just doesn't ever explode, right? It stays in this very constrained space, which is also great. Like that works out really well. That's very conservative. Yeah, anyway, that's sort of my take. Okay. How fucked would you have been on that music puzzle if you had not had chat? Pretty fucked. I mean, I would have... There's a small chance that I still would have gotten it in 3 tries. Like, it's not outside the realm of possibility. Because I was fairly close. Like, I just needed to make one switch. And I did not know what switch that was. But, like, my next move probably would have been... Well, it would have been one of 2 things. It either would have been to, like, really listen hard to the whole thing a bunch of times. And presumably, like, I might have... Like, that is a thing that I might have done because it was the right thing. I don't know that it is the only thing that I might have done. I don't know if it would have been the actual thing that I would have done. But I could have done it because, you know, it was right. So, like, I wouldn't have been... I wouldn't have said, like, oh, no, that's definitely totally wrong. Like, I'm not that bad. But there's certainly no guarantee. Or the other thing that I might have done is, like, throw up my hands and be like, fucking audio puzzle, Jesus Christ, no. And then I probably would have looked it up online, which is 100% exactly what I did the first time that I played Myst. I got to that stupid fucking audio, like, pitch puzzle where you have to, like, play a piano, and I was just like, no, somebody tell me what the keys that I'm supposed to press are. I'll do that. So, you know. Yeah, so thank you, chat. Thank you, people who can hear things better than me, for helping me through that situation. Eve is telling me that the pattern is not the same every time. I don't know if that if you're referring to Myst or this game. In Myst, I think it is. Oh shit, maybe it's not. How did I solve that then? Well, it certainly didn't have a like limited number of tries. In this game, the pattern's not always the same. Yeah. And that makes sense to me. That makes perfect sense to me, and that's fine. Yeah, so I would have looked that up, and I don't know, then maybe quit the game. Well, I would have found out, I guess I would have found out what happens if you get it wrong 3 times. You probably get a Steam achievement for that. So, you know, maybe it's all bright. Okay, I think Jetlag's back. Yeah, there we are. Would this game have been better with dragons? So, okay, I'm going to think about how to interpret this a couple of different ways, right? There's a literal, like, what if we had just put a dragon in the game? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, like, part of the key to this game, like a real core element of it is that, you don't actually interact with anyone else. So I don't know that you could put a dragon in this as a character, and have it like really there, like open a door and hey, it's a dragon, regardless of like what happens next, regardless of whether it like breathes fire at you or just wants to chat or like has a riddle that like you have to answer. Like all of that would feel incredibly out of place. Okay, so let's interpret dragon less literally. We've talked about how dragon is an element that breaks the rules, right? That sort of takes the understood framework of the game and presents a higher level challenge by actually undermining that fundamental framework. And I feel like the game kind of has some dragons in it. I feel like the I mean, at the very least, I sort of feel like the room at the end, that like, you know, weird sci-fi room, like when the game goes from being apparently set in like 1986 to being apparently set in like 2025, that's like a dragon moment. That's like I go into this, like I go into this new room, and now instead of all of these like solid oak hotel doors, there's something that's like straight out of Portal. That is like, that's kind of dragony. Like I don't know that you get more dragony than that. You could in a mechanical way, right? That's thematic, that's narrative. And it sort of frankly didn't, well, I mean, actually, I don't know that wouldn't work. Again, like I keep coming back to, if the game had a premise, if it had been like, if it had given me something solid to stand on at the beginning, then maybe that twist would have like really worked out. Like I don't object to the idea that like the world is different than I thought it was, and that being sort of an interesting moment. Mechanically, what would a dragon look like? You know, we had a lot of puzzles in this game that follow the like fundamental basic rules of escape rooms that we all understand going into it. That that the world is made up of locks and keys, and that every lock has a key, and that every key exists in the space of the world, in this sort of contained area. That it is always possible to progress. That, you know, I don't know. Like all of those are fun. That inventory, that like when you get inventory, it has a single use to which you can put it. That there are class of objects that are clues, and that clues always have a corresponding lock and key. Or, you know, if you want to interpret clues as keys, clues always have a corresponding lock. The game doesn't have like really have red herrings. It sort of has narrative red herrings, but not mechanical red herrings. It doesn't have anything that breaks the fourth wall. It doesn't have any locks that can't be opened. those are dragons in this kind of a game, in this genre of game. And those fundamental assumptions exist for pretty specific reasons. They're like strong best practices. They're not just like default states or common design patterns or suggestions. They're reasons why they exist to prevent really broken things from happening. And which isn't to say that you can't break those rules, but you got to be really careful in doing it. And I think, I love games that break the fourth wall. Well, I mean, again, we've got a whole, listen to me talking, we've got a whole segment in the middle, smack in the middle of this game that, for no reason suddenly defies physics, right? It removes everything that we understand. The game up until that point and after that point is a simulation of a physically realistic world. But for a little while, it's not. I think that this game is totally full of dragons. It just doesn't have any characters in it. Yeah. Will you be wearing your lucky shirt at your wedding? I bet you whatever shirt I'm wearing at my wedding will be a lucky shirt. Yeah, you all probably heard on Monday at Mostly Walking, but I got engaged last weekend, and I'm super, super excited about it. I'm very happy. So there's not a date for a wedding yet, but I will at some point get married, and at this point I can tell you with pretty high certainty that I will be wearing a shirt. Yeah. Let's do a show and tell. This is not it, but I do want to show this off for anybody who hasn't seen it. I posted it on Twitter at some point, but focus? No focus. Meh. You can see the picture though. It's Dr. Vouchard. This is a card, a professor card from a game called Robottery4000. Robottery4000 is a card game about building giant space robots in order to improve your GPA. It's a card game that's made by some of my students this semester who are polishing it and figuring out how to market it. There will be a Kickstarter at some point, probably this summer, and you'll hear a lot more about that from me. There is also a playtest / demo that is happening tomorrow night in Los Angeles. So if you live in the Los Angeles area and like tabletop games and are interested in seeing this student game where I am actually a character in it, it's going to be at Aero Hobbies, which is in West LA, somewhere between Culver City and Santa Monica. Tomorrow night. I'll put details up on the Twitter. I think it's 7 o'clock. Yeah, anyway, it's super cool. It's super fun. Come and play it if you are around and can. Let me pull something off my shelf though. Let's go with this one. So I'm gonna do, I think, a series of these over the next several show and tells of the some of my indie RPG books, because I have a collection of them and they're all pretty great. So this one is Night Witches by Jason Morningstar. Jason Morningstar is one of my favorite indie RPG developers. If you are not familiar with RPGs, role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of a thing, the game is just a book, right? And the book is instructions for essentially how to structure a game with a group of people, where the game is some form of collaborative storytelling. And often they use dice or something like that in order to introduce risk and chance into the story. And often they have somebody who is primarily a storyteller and other people who react to the story that's being told. Night Witches is a game that is about World War II Soviet pilots, specifically a group of women who flew World War I era planes, bombers, canvas wing bombers, over Germany during World War II. And they would cut engines, and these old planes would essentially act as gliders, and so they would glide out over enemy targets and then drop some form of munitions, and they were called Night Witches because the planes would make sort of an eerie whistling sound, because they didn't actually sound like planes. They didn't have engines running when they did their bombing runs. They would just make this sort of eerie whistling sound, and then out of nowhere an attack would come from the Night Witches. And so the game is about sort of being a bomber, being, in wartime, fighting against Nazis, being a Soviet. But it's also about being a woman in the Soviet army, which, sort of ostensibly treated all citizens of the Soviet Union as equals, as comrades and comrades in arms. And one of the major advantages of the Soviet Union in World War II was that they fielded way more soldiers than the Germans thought that they would, because the Germans assumed that they would only field men. And the Soviets actually fielded a much more egalitarian military force than anybody sort of expected. And so they had, much higher numbers than anybody expected. But the women who fought in the Soviet military faced an enormous amount of sexism, both specific and personal, and systemic. For example, the reason that this group of women flew outdated World War I era bombers is because nobody wanted to give women the actual good planes. They also didn't want to give women actual good bombs, and so they'd fly these planes over enemy targets and drop bricks and just like anything heavy, bits of metal and like crowbars and things, hammers, which at the sort of speed that they would impact caused significant damage, but not the same as like a fragmentation grenade or a bomb. So the game is sort of half about flying missions and trying to support the cause of the war and not get shot down by Germans or like, you know, killed in battle. And then the other half is trying to exist as a part of the Soviet army and everything that is sort of associated with that. It's a fascinating game, full of history. It's built on the Apocalypse engine, which if you are a tabletop role-playing gamer, that will mean something to you. If it doesn't mean anything to you, that's fine. It's just what has become one of the standards of sort of patterns by which games are created and run. But it does some really interesting things. It tackles some really, really interesting issues. Jason Morningstar is sort of famous for creating these often historically inspired, but also often very dark, bleak kinds of narrative experiences in role-playing games. And Night Witches is one that actually has more color to it, or at least has like some leeway, some room for some really cool adventure stories and like military victory and glory, but at the same time, you know, doesn't ever ignore or get too far away from the darker parts of that story. So yeah, really super fucking cool game. Recommended if you like tabletop role-playing games. If you haven't played tabletop role-playing games in the past, you know, you can always find a group somewhere to play D&D with, but you may actually want to look into some of the modern indie RPGs that exist, because they are they cover a much wider range of thematic topics, sort of subject areas and genres than you may think about tabletop RPGs being about. It's not all Dungeons and Dragons, you know, swords and sorcery kinds of stuff. There's some really interesting, you know, historically based or rooted in other genre fiction kinds of stuff. Anyway, that's cool. It has been a pleasure. Thank you guys so much. I will see you on Monday for Mostly Walking. I'll see you again next week for play-by-play. Yeah, we're gonna try to announce some stuff in the nearish future. Hoping to expand things at least a little bit, but I'm not gonna talk about that now because I don't know exactly all of the form that it's gonna take, and I don't want to promise anything that doesn't end up happening. But keep your eyes open. Stay tuned. I think, you know, good things coming in the future. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for the questions. And I hope everybody has a lovely night.